David Sanders. There's Cliff. David Sanders is
Ready?
tuning in from home across the street from Still and Moving Center. Janani is joining us not from Honolulu as usual, where she's a grad student in mathematics at UH, but instead she is coming to us from Arizona. My mom is getting on from Oakland, California. Z is getting on, and he lives in the same town Cliff and I do in Kaneohe. So nice to have you, Z. Hi, Mom. Rather than read from the back of this year's almanac, which is our typical way of starting one of our sessions, what I'd like to do today is to invite Janani to give a Hindu mantra to start today's section, and then I will introduce her in the topic.
Thank you, Renee. I'll just go ahead and get started then, and then I'll explain it a little bit after the introduction. Om Angikam Bhuvanam Yasya Vachikam Sarvavanmayam Aharyam Chandrataradi Tam Numa Satvikam Shivam.
Thank you so much, Janani. Welcome, everybody, to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle hosted every week by Still and Moving Center, in which we hope to really pull out from each of us the deep wisdom that each of us have, no matter what traditions we might come from. Today, we are taking up the topic that pertains to the important Hindu holiday that will happen later this week of Mahashivaratri, the vigil night of Shiva. And our topic for this week is Shiva's dance of transformation. It's been my pleasure to often watch our presenter, Janani Lakshmanan, perform sacred Bharatanatyam dances. And I note that whenever possible, a Bharatanatyam dancer will honor a Shiva statue, such as the one right there beside me, before beginning the dance. And this particular Shiva statue is called Shiva Nataraj, Shiva, Lord of the Dance. And for that reason, I believe Bharatanatyam dancers honor the statue before they begin their dancing. Janani has been part of the Still and Moving Center Ohana for about 3 years, when she found out that we do a fairly authentic celebration of Diwali, the Indian festival of light, every year, where we reenact the story of the Ramayana. As I mentioned a little earlier, she's a grad student in a very specialized topic of mathematics at UH Manoa. She has been studying Bharatanatyam dance since childhood. And when I've had the chance to interview her, we have a story about Janani that came out a year or so ago, and that I'll see if I can find and put into our chat for those of you who might want to look it up. One of her real heartfelt motivations in life and here in Hawaii is to share her culture to the extent that she can. As such, she participates in many aspects of Bharatanatyam, from performance to helping others, like Still and Moving Center, put on performances. And also she has her own group of children dancers whom she teaches It's a big privilege for me to introduce and welcome Janani Lakshmanan.
It's my privilege. The privilege is mine, Renee. Every time you've invited me to this space, to the space of the Still and Moving Center, I've been so enriched by the experience. Thank you very much again for having me. I really keep telling myself I ought to make it to more of these, but this is my second time participating in Gems for the Wisdom traditions, and I'm very happy to be here. I sort of have a little bit of a presentation for you all, but I'll try not to make it too talky. It's going to be a bit more like story time, because one of the sort of foundational truths, I guess you can say, about Hinduism, even though it's not a monolithic faith system, is that it is passed down primarily through an oral tradition of storytelling. And in a similar way, Bharatanatyam, which is the tradition that I can most authentically claim to represent, specifically the Varivud Bani of Bharatanatyam, is at its core a storytelling art form. So I kind of come at it from that perspective. I am going to request to share my screen if that's okay, so that I can show you all this presentation I put together. It's got some pictures in it. I guess while, okay, wonderful. So, we had sort of a reading passage that I put together for you all, and I hope some of you took a look at that, but if not, we'll revisit each of those passages throughout this talk. And I would ask for volunteers in the middle to try their best to read the verse or passage presented in each of those sections. So if you feel like putting your voice out there today, just clear your throat, get yourself a drink of water, and be ready for me to ask, okay? So I guess I'll start off by sort of elucidating a little bit of the sloka, the mantra that I started out with. This is specifically a dhyana sloka, which means it's intended to guide one's meditation. It is a meditation on the forms of Nataraja himself, of Shiva in his embodied form. So it says essentially that his limbs are the worlds, his voice and his words are the skies, they fill the skies, his adornments are the moon and stars, and his soul is peace. He embodies peace. And this is a meditation intended to evoke his mental image for us as devotees, but it's also a handy little mnemonic for Bharatanatyam dancers who use it to remember the 4 different kinds of abhinaya, or expression, storytelling, specifically the storytelling you do with your body, so body language, what you do with your mouth, with your words, with lyrics to a song that you might be dancing to, with your adornments, with what you chose to put on that morning and walk out into the world and announce about yourself that day. And finally, about how you feel truly inside, the story that you're telling yourself. And all of these are aspects of what Bharatanatyam has taught me. Just that no matter what, we are all storytellers, and Nataraja is sort of the epitome of that, and it's who we should strive to be as storytellers. So in some sense, we revere Nataraja, yes, Renee, like you said, when we touch the feet of the idol, we are bowing to him, not only as some kind of flawless ideal, but also as an aspirational goal as performers and storytellers. And I invite you all to consider yourself among that number as well, right? We are all telling our own stories as we go. All right, so just to give you all a brief overview of what I'm going to be chatting to you all about, I'm going to talk a little bit about who is Nataraja, what are the Panchasabha, what are these 5 halls that I've mentioned now and again. And then I'll go through each of the 5 halls, show you some pictures, and tell you a little bit about the verse and the story that corresponds to the space. I will try to keep it to the 20 minutes I was told to. Um, but first and foremost, I wanted to show this beautiful picture of the Still and Moving Center, which I honestly just found on Google Images. It's not quite as nice as some of the other pictures we have. But here is the Nataraja that first brought me to Renee's doorstep, metaphorically speaking. I saw an image of this space online, and when I noticed the Nataraja in the background, I knew it was somewhere that I had to be. I had to be a part of it, and so now I'm here. Um, and here on the left, I've listed some bullet points about Nataraja, who is a form of the Hindu god Shiva. And when I say a form, some think of Nataraja as an incarnation of Shiva. So the idea of an avatar or avatar is fairly common in Hindu pantheism. The idea that gods can incarnate as other versions of themselves, all being facets of the same divine soul. But truly, historically, if you trace the records of what happened, my personal faith aside, what likely happened is that there were two individual figures, Nataraja and Shiva. Nataraja being the god of the Vedas, so he was sort of from the scriptures, the Sanskritic Vedic traditions. And Shiva was more of a tribal god associated with kind of the indigenous Adivasi communities of northern India, so sort of tribal communities. And so the distinction in the two presentations of the idols or the two deities is sort of put down to that. So Nataraja is this beautiful cosmic dancer embodying grace, and yet at the same time, Shiva has these aspects of him that are wild and untamed, and so these sort of the study in contrast that is Shiva or Nataraja is partly due to the fact that he was at once two people. And the two ancestries sort of come from it in that sense. And so that I think is something that you want to keep in mind, is that when we think of him as aspirational, you're trying to aspire to more than an individual. So as I was saying, Nataraja is the idea of the Vedic dancer. So in the Vedas, he is one of the creation agents of the universe. And he is embodied through that exact sloka that I described earlier. His limbs are considered the worlds, and his words the skies, and so on. And this contrasts with other depictions of Shiva, who is usually worshipped in the form of a lingam, which is a sort of stone object that is worshipped, representing Shiva's status as a male figure and as a deity of fertility. And so usually in temples, you'll see that the lingam is the version of Shiva most commonly worshipped. The Panchasabha, the 5 halls of which this presentation gets its name, are the first and kind of main temples where the idol of Nataraja is worshipped over the idol of the Shiva Linga. So that's why I felt like those 5 were a useful theme for us to touch on in today's conversation. So the 5 halls, Pancha Sabha. Sabha comes from the word for like stage, or literally like auditorium, theater, right? So Pancha Sabha you can think of them as places where Nataraja dances. They're his dance halls, they're his performing venues. Each of the 5 temples has a precious material associated with it, and I'll go through those as we proceed. And there are also 5 dances associated with each of these temples or halls. Now, I wanted to emphasize this because when Renee and I spoke a little bit about the initial sort of prompt for this session, Shiva's dance of transformation, the first thing that occurred to me was that, well, there's not just one dance of transformation, right? There is the sort of dance of creation and destruction that he performs on Mahashivaratri, which is what is being commemorated this week. But Shiva as a dancer, Nataraja as a dancer, has quite a vast repertoire, as you might imagine, considering all of dance originated from him, or so the legends say. And so there are 5 main tandavas, which are the dances associated with Shiva, again, specifically. And each one corresponds to a different legend and a different facet of the Nataraja at each of these temples. So here are images of of the 5 temples. The one on the left is Chidambaram, as Renee and Cliff you might recognize, and anyone else who's been lucky enough to visit. And then here are the 5 Natarajas. So you can see here that these are all depictions of the same figure, but with like notable visual differences of each of them. So these are the names of the cities in which these temples reside, and then these are the names of the halls given in the exact same translation as is from before. So these are all written in the South Indian language Tamil, which is the same language that the poetry I sent out in the email blast before this meeting was also in the language Tamil originally. Okay, so I want to move on to talking about the temples a little bit more individually, but I'd love to ask if there are any questions at this point.
Good. Keep
Good.
going.
Okay, let's keep going. Absolutely. Oh my. So the first of these temples is Chidambaram, the Hall of Gold. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on the story for this because I will display a video of it in just a minute. But Chidambaram is the Hall of Gold. It's the first among the 5 sabhas because it is the Kanaka Sabha. It is the gold hall. So you can see here, this dome is actually plated in gold. And this has been sort of a fixture of the sort of historiography of the time of the location, right? So the dome has been pillaged time and time again, and eventually some, well-meaning benefactor has always tried to restore the dome and so on and so forth. And now we're at a place where it is for everyone to see, and it seems to be safe and sound now. But it is sort of the most iconic of these because Chidambara Nataraja has the unique trait of being not only one of the Pancha Sabhas, but it's also one of the Pancha Bhuta Stalas. So he's worshipped as both the dancer and in that abstract form of the lingam from earlier. The only difference is that the lingam is said to be invisible because it's made of space. So both of them are worshipped, but the fact that there's no material reflection of the latter is an important part of Chidambaram, the place of thought. And here comes my first request for a volunteer. Can I get a volunteer to read this verse?
Okay. The snake coils around his limbs. The conch in Vishnu's hand trembles at the sight. Flashes of fire blaze from his body. In sacred Tilala, he dances his dance. And I, drawn close, see my faults disappear, drenched in the supreme bliss he bestows. Ananda Tanbandam, the dance of ecstasy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I appreciate your intonation as well. That really felt appropriate. This is an excerpt from a Tamil poem known as the Kunchita Grishtavam, as my notes are telling me, written by a saint poet known as Manika Vachakar in the language Tamil. Kunchita Grishtavam translates to the hymn to the raised foot. Specifically talking about the fact that Nataraja is depicted as standing on one leg. But I chose this particular quote because it reminded me of one of the most memorable aspects of the one time I've been to Chidambaram, which is just the fact that if you stand in one specific spot, you can see both an idol of Vishnu and an idol of Shiva at the same time. And that's sort of rare. Usually the idols in temples are all sort of facing the same way, so you have to move from one to another to get a glimpse of multiple. But you can sort of stand at like a T-junction and look to the left and see Vishnu reclining in his typical pose, and look in front of you and see Shiva in, full splendor dancing. Um, and I think that this is a really interesting aspect of this poem, because typically the Shaivite poets were notorious almost for only praising Shiva's glory, but here they're describing an aspect of Vishnu even as a devotee. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but I have a little clip for you all, if you don't mind the shameless self-promotion. This is a clip from a performance that my friends and I did recently at Ala Moana Center Stage. Do we have time for this, Renee?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We can't hear it, Janani. I think you might need to do original sound for musicians on.
Try again, Janani.
All right. So that was a glimpse at the story of Chidambaram, which essentially the temple was formed to commemorate the site of Shiva's glorious takedown of a few egotistical sages who didn't recognize him when he appeared in the guise of a hunter to answer their prayers, and tried to chase him away with summoning a whole bunch of evil elements. So you see the sages filled with arrogance for their knowledge and scriptures and all that stuff, summoning a rampaging elephant, a stampeding herd of deer, a tiger, and indeed a little demon that one by one Nataraja, in the guise of the hunter, bests. And each of those attributes becomes part of his form. So the sort of iconic tiger skin robe, the drum made out of the skin of a deer, and then finally the little imp that Nataraja is depicted as dancing on is shown. here. So that is just kind of how Nataraja got his aspects. And this is supposed to have taken place in Chidambara. So I'm gonna keep going, but I did want to I wanted to point out one thing, which is sort of silly, really, but there's something about this clip that always bothers me, and I don't even know if anyone else noticed it, but I will. It's that my earring fell out. My left earring fell out on stage in the middle of this piece, and I had to go find it after. It was really, really terrible. It's like one of those things that, like, if it gets in your head, it ruins the entire rest of the show. But you can't let it do that. The show must go on. Anyway, I call that to your attention for a reason. So, on to the next temple of Nataraja. We have Madurai. Madurai is where the Hall of Silver is located. And initially you would have had a dome covered in silver leaf, but now the silver, due to the fact that, I mentioned that there are invaders throughout South India at these times, throughout history, the silver is mostly limited to the adornments of the idol inside, but these are all pure silver, and you can see that silver like sort of tarnishes in the light, right? So the inside of this hall is kept quite dark in order to prevent it oxidizing. So this kind of flash photography is it's very rare to see an image of this particular Nataraja. I'll ask for another volunteer real quick to read this verse.
Can't
I
see
can read it.
people. Thank you, Kirk.
In sacred Madurai, where he lovingly dwells, the Lord whose fame spreads far and wide, he who is praised by the pure-hearted, rushes forth in joy to bless those who call upon him. Sandhya Tandavam, the dance of evenings.
That's correct. Thank you very much. And I wanted to point something out here. It is the Sandhya Tandavam, the dance of evenings, and you can see that the quote sort of highlights his loving and kind nature, his pure-heartedness as well. And I also wanted to point out a little bit of a spot the difference here. So I'm going to go back to this image of Nataraja. Does anyone see anything different from the Nataraja that, for instance, is sitting behind Renee right now?
Who's got more clothing? For
He
one.
does, yes, that is fair. He's sort of dressed up and ready to party on this day, but that notwithstanding, anything else? All right, I'll give you a hint. It's the only one in this picture with this specific characteristic.
The leg is the right leg on the pointing in right direction.
Absolutely. Well done. Ding, ding, ding. 10 points. So, Nataraja is almost always depicted with his left leg lifted. Here, Nataraja is depicted with his right leg lifted. And this is the only place on earth where such a depiction of Nataraja exists. Now, why could that be? Well, if you remember, this particular aspect of Nataraja, the idea of it being an evening dance, the idea of it being cast in silver, is pointing out these very compassionate karunya, so he's known as Karunakara, the embodiment of kindness, aspects of Nataraja. And as luck would have it, it turns out that the reason why his right leg is lifted here is not some kind of error, but indeed a very intentional part of the iconography and sort of historiography of this temple. So this temple was built by the rulers known as the Pandyas, and in particular, the Pandyas were a very accomplished clan of ruling men. So they were trained in not only all the arts of warcraft and statescraft, but also just performing arts in general. And so the Pandya king would come to the temple to meditate quite frequently. And on one of his meditations, he remembered his days when he was trained in dancing to help him be more graceful and fluid in battle. And he beheld Nataraja standing there on his right leg with his left leg lifted day after day after day. And he thought to himself, my goodness, he must be in such pain. And then he wept feeling the pain of Shiva in his heart. And lo and behold, the story goes, the statue changed before his very eyes to lift its right leg instead, because Nataraja, the compassionate, kind-hearted deity, could not stand to see his devotee grieve for him. And so this is the only place in the world that you'll see a Nataraja with the opposite leg lifted. And I just think that's a beautiful story. All right, I'm going to keep going. We've got Tiruvalangada next, which is the third of these temples. Here we've got the Hall of Gemstones. And this one's another unique looking Nataraja. So you can see here that it is his left leg that's lifted this time, but it's lifted off to the side in a very sort of theatrical, almost ballet fashion. And you see here that the goddess Kali is actually depicted as looking at him with her hands raised in praise and awe. Generally, gods in temples are almost always blessing devotees and turn towards the people who are worshiping them. But here, even Kali is worshiping Nataraja in supplication. One more volunteer?
Diana, thank you.
Oops. As water dries up when the flood recedes, so too was the proud goddess Kali, humbled and defeated, with just a single movement of his divine feet. The Lord who rides the bull dances in the great Turugandadu, and those who bow to his sacred feet shall rise above the world. Or Dava Tandavam, the skyward dance, sorry.
No need to apologize. So the Urdhva Tandavam is kind of almost obviously referring to the fact that his foot is pointed towards the sky. And remember when I mentioned that little anecdote about my earring? It comes up here. So in this story, the story associated with this temple, we've got a little bit of a domestic spat. Shiva and his wife Parvati, or in this case Nataraja and Kali, in these specific depictions, are having a little bit of a disagreement, a little bit of a tiff about who is the better dancer. And so in probably like the first ever recorded dance battle, they decide to imitate one another's dance moves. And so the sort of entire pantheon of the gods are called to judge this contest, and Nataraja and Parvati go off. They you know, one after the other, they perform a series of movements that the other one replicates perfectly. Now, until in one moment, Nataraja's earring falls loose. His left earring falls out. And with his left foot, he picks it up and places it back in his left ear without breaking step. And at that point, Kali's like, I can't do that. And she admits defeat. And so I think that's a hilarious little story because, man, if I could lift my leg like that, then, you know, I wouldn't have had that issue. So, you know, aspirational, as we were saying from before. Anyway, I think this is a really humorous little anecdote, and just kind of depicts some of the more relatable aspects of Nataraja and kind of some of the stuff that I connect to as a dancer. All right, we've got two more temples. We've got Tirunelveli, the Hall of Copper. And you can see here, these pillars are all made of copper, which is beautifully oxidizing over the centuries. If it's all right, I'll read this one actually, because I want to kind of go into the story behind this one. The Lord who is worshipped by celestial beings dwells in lush, fertile Tirunelveli. He is the cosmic dancer, the pure and matchless one, praised by those of true devotion and wisdom. Muni Tandavam, the dance of the sage. So this specific place, Tirunelveli, has always been known as a really fertile ground. It's its name literally means the revered place of, I guess, sesame. Nil is like it's not sesame. I can't think of the word in English right now, but I'm sure it'll come to me. It's a specific staple carbohydrate that is common in the diet, and it's very commonly grown there. So the fertility of this land is like in the name itself, which is why it made a perfect spot for Shiva and Parvati, Nataraja and Sivakami to elope to. But the happy couple needed someone to officiate their wedding. And so they call upon Lord Vishnu, who appears for the sake of giving away Parvati to Shiva in this spot, in this very spot. And so they are married in the forests of Tirunelveli, and they enjoy their conjugal bliss in the sort of fertile, lush surroundings. And eventually, a sage is born of this union, Sage Agastya, who is known for writing down and passing on the majority of the Vedas. So that's kind of the story for that one. And then last but certainly not least, I wanted to finish with Tirukutralam because I think that, like, maybe this was something that other people felt when they saw this image for the first time. This place resembles Hawaii to to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I honestly feel like they have very similar energies and very similar just, I mean, scenery for one. But I also think that the idea of a place that holds art in high regard and a place that holds nature in high regard can't be too far off from each other. And I think that we have that in both Tirukutralam and in the Still and Moving Center. So I wanted to close with this one, which is why it's interesting that we come back to this idea, this full circle idea of the dance of transformation, which is both a creative energy, so in a hall of paintings, and a destructive energy, the dance in which the three cities are burned down, the Tripura Tandavam. Can I get one last volunteer to read this verse?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Oh, no, go ahead, please, Jade.
Thank you. O Lord of Lords, the one who burned Tripura, O Master of Kutralam, surrounded by lush groves. For those who do not recognize you as their guru, neither form nor thought shall ever bring them peace. Tripura Tandavam, the dance of the three cities.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to Jade and to all the volunteers. Really, you did an amazing job. And I want to say, just to close out the story of this particular temple, the three cities are a mythical place, not a literal place, because Kutralam is actually a nature preserve. This town is situated like almost entirely surrounded by nature sanctuaries, and so like there's no cities there. These cities are actually mythical ones founded by a sort of trio of brothers, demon brothers, who kind of built these as fortresses to keep people out, and keep their wealth intact and sort of keep growing it. And the gods, when I say the gods, I suppose more so the demigods, the devas, saw this and they resented the demons, not for the just injustice of the act, but also for making it seem like the devas couldn't accomplish this task themselves. And so they appealed to Nataraja to save them from these demons, to kind of teach the demons a lesson. But their intention in doing so wasn't as pure as it could have been, right? Like they were resentful, and that shouldn't have been the reason to be righteous. So the Nataraja tells them, all right, build me a chariot, build me a massive chariot as big as one of the cities. And so they use all of the resources of all the gods. They travel far and wide to worlds like heretofore undiscovered, right? And they come back and they bring resources for this massive chariot for Shiva to go to war against these three cities. So what happens? They build this giant chariot, which is a marvel and a masterpiece, and Shiva looks at it, turns away, takes one look at the three cities, and ignites them on fire with just a blink of his eyes and a smile. And the devas are absolutely just forlorn because they see the chariot going up in flames with these three cities. So this endeavor that they put all of their resources into, now all the devas have nothing. They put everything they had into this. And Shiva, with his just absolutely no, like he does not take nonsense from anyone, right? He does not stand for arrogance. And so he's like, all right, if you want to come at me with that attitude, be prepared to take it back. And so in that sense, excuse me. Sorry. As I was saying, so in that sense, Nataraja is right. He has a point to make. He's going to make the point. And here Brahma appeals to Nataraja, saying, see how the gods wished for your assistance, and here you are taunting them like this. What can you do to make it up for them? And Shiva's like, all right, they've suffered enough. And so he ceases the burning of the chariot, stands in it, and then as the cities burn to ash, takes out an arrow from his quiver and shoots it into the burning wreckage and said, look, you helped. So with that little example of Nataraja's anecdotes of humor and just, oh, this is not me. Anyway, here is my closing slide. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, or we can chat a little bit for the next few minutes.
Hey, thank you so much. Oh, yes. A marvelous, marvelous presentation, Janani. Does everybody have Janani's Gmail address if they need it? And then we'll allow us all to see each other's images.
I'll stop sharing in a few seconds. And I can put it in the chat if anyone wants.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Okay, so we do have this topic for the week of Shiva's dance of transformation. We got to hear a lot about the mythology and the iconography of Shiva in ways that I don't think any of the rest of us have ever seen or heard of before, Janani. That was really remarkable. And so interesting to see all the different forms of Shiva, to find out that this idea of Nataraja, Lord of the Dance, was a Vedic idea. And that's the image that we see right there by my shoulder. That's Lord of the Dance. Whereas this god Shiva, who is often seen as the god of destruction for the sake of recreation, was perhaps a tribal god, I think named Rudra, of northern India. So that was another interesting point to find out. So even he and his depiction in his history has transformed to a certain degree. And I just wanted to open up the conversation for the idea of the dance of transformation. The dance of transformation. How that might look in our lives if our transformations were more dances than everything getting destroyed and then recreated, such as the phoenix imagery or some of the images of Shiva too, of emerging from ashes, but more of a dance of transformation. And I wonder what that might mean to any of us. Or other questions or comments that anybody might have.
Well, maybe just to start off, I think everyone probably knows this, but you know, Shiva is viewed as sort of the master Mahayogin, the master meditator, uh, and is sort of so much his inner, of his inner work, and he kind of symbolizes discipline and things like that. And yet, on the other hand, you have this very active part of Shiva, always seen with the Trimurti, even though he has the Trimurti in him, etc., as the destroyer, but also the regenerator. And I'm wondering if the dance is kind of the mediating bridge or the link between the Mahashiva, that's the supreme meditator, undisturbed, unified, indivisible God, and at the same time, the cycles that have to, by law, have to, whether they're karmic or otherwise, where you have to have this, a kind of a coming in with some education, but also destruction, and then planting the seeds for regeneration. So I'm wondering, is that a way to understand the dance as kind of the bridge between that?
Great question. David, are you going to give us some thoughts?
Well, yeah, I was thinking transformation, change, and dancing. Dancing is generally done as movement. It's rhythmic. One action follows the other. It's a progression, as our transformation is. It's lyrical, I'm thinking, that our transformation is something that has a natural rhythm to it. There's a beauty to it. I see a hand up. Janani?
I just had something, if you were done.
Yeah,
I
I
just wanted
am.
to mention, I think that your description of dance as a sequence of movements is super like interesting, and I think a lot of us do relate to that idea of a dance. But I also want to say, like there is the traditional depiction of a dance in the Natya Shastra, which is the text that's said to have originated from Nataraja, which is that a dance is not movements strung together, but individual poses connected by movement. So the dance is not the movement, it's the individual stillness, like it like sort of images, and that's what's described in the texts. So the idea of the dance as being sort of the bridge between the inward stillness and the outward movement, like David and Maurice, was it? That's
Yes.
super interesting.
I think we could see that in the Chidambaram dance that you depicted, Janani. That there would be a pose, you dance, pose, dance, pose. Yeah, yeah. And I love the final pose where you're all lined up behind one another. And we had both the right legs, left legs lifted, I noted.
That's very interesting from the yogic perspective as well. And the different schools of yoga, and in terms of the asana, is that some schools would focus on the pose itself, whereas others would focus on the flow between them, the movement that connects them together. One not being superior to the other, but different aspects of the same. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
I have a question for Janani. Actually, I have a bunch of them, but I'm narrowing it down. So just what you're talking about, it being a series of poses connected by movements, and each of the poses having a meaning, a significance for the arm placements, the leg placements, the head, every aspect of the bodily form in each of those poses has a specific meaning as well. Isn't that right? And so that each dance is also like a storyline in a way. So can you describe that for us? Is each dance a transformation in that sense, or is it more? Could you say that each one is a drama in and of itself, or a storyline in itself that has some specific meaning in relation to the spiritual quest?
So I had an answer in mind, and then you said that last bit, and I'm like, ooh, I'm rethinking the whole thing. So bear with me when I like try to put my thoughts in order. So I would answer that not all dance is a literal story being told from the performer to an audience, right? But I think if we think about the process of like dancing, it always requires a transformation of the self, right? So in a spiritual sense, we are forgetting our physical realities, our self-consciousness, our insecurities, everything about ourselves that holds us down to free ourselves and release ourselves in some kind of preordained or improvised movement. So in some sense, yeah, I believe that there's a spiritual transformation going on there. I believe that I am shedding like my identity, my ego, when I, take on a dance and make it part of myself. More like even if I'm not telling a story that belongs to another person, does that make sense? So in that dance, the video I showed, I was telling a story, and so clearly I can't be myself in that because I wasn't there. But even if I were doing pure dance, pure movement, I'm still forgetting, oh, this, my physical discomfort, or just, what I had for breakfast that morning. Like all that stuff is not there. I'm not there. So that's what I would say.
Nice. Thank you. Would you say, without going on too long about it, would you say that for each of the traditional dance, not all of them are telling a story, but all of them there's a specific series of meanings, and that each of the postures has a meaning, or not?
Yes and no. That's the brief answer.
I want
Intrinsically,
clear
like I
answer
think
too, please.
context gives it meaning more so than the individual poses.
Okay.
Yeah. I can like talk to you more about that later though.
All right.
Uh,
Cliff has a question.
Yeah, Janani, I was thinking about that phrase you said right at the very beginning about the stories that we tell ourselves. And when you're doing dance, you're just really engaged in it. You can't be passive. You're very engaged. And over the years, we all develop a certain personal sense of identity. But I was just wondering if by being engaged in dance, as thinking of it as a transformative process, if it's in a way, you're not just only telling a story to your audience, but you're also telling a story to yourself that can actually be self-transforming. I just think that's interesting that we're always constantly telling ourselves a story, but it can become a broken record. But this way it can be an evolving story, a deepening story.
I just finished sharing most of the video by Amy Cuddy doing a TED Talk on power poses and the effects that it has on our physiology and our mental space when we take certain shapes in our body. And it was the same discussion about the impact of these poses and even to the point of changing hormonal levels in our body. Standing like this for 2 minutes raises our testosterone and lowers our cortisol. And it's amazing that we're having this discussion now. that the dance has these effects on us. And she also talks about the stories that we tell ourselves through our body language, not only what we share with others through our body language, but the stories that we tell ourselves through our body language when we make ourselves small versus when we make ourselves big. So Cliff, thank you for that reflection.
Jade.
Thank you so much, Janani, for sharing a part of your passion. Your performance was so beautiful. And I loved how you and the other two dancers just transformed into one of the poses at the very end. It was just so delightful. It was like a lotus blossoming. And I can see the dedication and the transformation that you've gone through just from that dance and the discipline that you put into it. And as others were talking about transformation, and when you were talking about the different statues and what each represented, it reminded me of how you almost have to be playful, joking, have a little madness, lots of discipline in order to go through that kind of progression and transformation to that self-mastery. So that was stunning. I'm so glad you got to share. My question for you is, I'm curious why you picked to share about these 5 halls and or something else that you shared on this presentation, and what inspires you about it. And I believe we will have even more takeaways from that.
I'd love to answer just as briefly as I can because I don't want to take up the time we have left, but what inspired me was just the fact that there is no one dance of transformation. There's at least 5, right? Given the 5 that we talked about. But I also wanted to share the stories very specifically because I know that like stories were my first way and my like still current only way of connecting to my culture and connecting to my spirituality especially. And so I find that like people can take fables and parables and all that and find some beautiful like pearls in them for themselves. So I told the story and I in my mind found a truth in it. So hopefully everyone else found some truth and it may not be the same truth.
Wonderful. Diana, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you said was it's not a flow, it's an individual poses of stillness strung together. And Buddhism talks about every step is the other shore. And if we take our journey, that every step we take is an individual, what it is now. And it's not that it's like this is this and then this is this, but they're strung together. But it's not a going to the end or waiting till the end. It's every single pose has its own stillness and its own sense. So it's really honoring our transformational journey as each step is the other shore is where, and so it's like really appreciating the value of the stillness or the value of that part of the transformation without maybe, just live this only moment without thinking, oh, I have to go there. But no, we're right here, right now in this only moment. And I really thought that was an individual transformation is about individual parts instead of feeling like it has to flow to an end. Each one has its own value and its own transformative experience. So I like that. Thank you. And your talk was marvelous. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm going to tell you about next week's presentation and theme, and I'll ask if somebody would care to give our vote of thanks to Janani after I do that. Next week's theme follows last week's theme, which was the religion of responsibility. And we had for that one, Robin Shepherd speak to us on Charles Dickens as someone who really seemed to live that religion of responsibility for others as it came through his novels, such as Great Expectations. Next week, we are going to take up not the religion of responsibility again, but the science of spirituality. And we have Kirk with us today, and he's going to be our presenter next week. And he's going to speak to that topic on this from the tradition of the ancient Greek Pythagorean tradition. So I think that will be a wonderful, amazing kind of juxtaposition from someone of the 1800s in England last week to hearing about this beautiful classical Indian dance tradition this week to next week, going to ancient Greece and the Pythagoreans. How lucky we all are. Is there somebody who would like to give Janani our vote of thanks for her presentation today? I always love this part.
I can share some wisdom, I think. I think, first of all, thank you so much, Janani, for sharing wisdom and traditions from both from the culture of South Indian dance and at the same time things that even I didn't know about for some of the ways how we would see Lord Shiva's dance forms. And I think it was insightful, and it was always pleasure to see you performing your dance and expressing the story for everyone and also enlightening us with some wisdoms. So, and I have a few things to share, I think, at the end, and would love to talk about that with you as well afterwards. And thank you so much, and mahalo.
Thank you so much, Dishan and Janani. We're always happy to stay on for a few extra minutes. We do want to close timely. So thank everyone so much for your attendance, and especially Janani for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you all. I have to head out to a dance rehearsal.
Okay.
My guru calls, so please feel free to email me. I would love to continue this conversation with every single one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Janani.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Janani is heading to this rehearsal, I'm sure, because her dance teacher is celebrating this month her 20th anniversary as a teacher of Bharatanatyam. And so Janani has gone to Arizona to join her for that special celebration. Weren't we lucky to have her join us today?
Thank you. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you so much, Maurice. Great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dishan and Jade and Kat for being a support personnel today. Yay.
I'll email you the recording of this as soon as I get it.
Thank you.
No worries. Okay. Have a good day.